This literally just happened last weekend, and I'm still trying to process everything. I was at this coffee shop in downtown Portland. You know, the kind with the exposed brick walls and those weird hanging plants everywhere. I wasn't even supposed to be there. My usual place was closed for renovations, so I just walked into the first spot I saw. I ordered my coffee and was scrolling through my phone when I heard this laugh. Not just any laugh, but this specific laugh that I hadn't heard in like 8 years. My whole body just froze. I looked up and there she was. Emma. Standing by the counter waiting for her drink, wearing this green jacket that somehow made her eyes look even more incredible than I remembered. Our eyes met, and for a second I thought maybe she wouldn't recognize me. Maybe I'd changed too much. Maybe she'd just look away. But then her face did this thing where her eyes got wide and her mouth opened just a little, and I knew. She remembered everything too. She walked over to my table, and I stood up so fast I almost knocked my coffee over. We just stood there, staring at each other for what felt like forever, but was probably only a few seconds. Then she said my name. Just my name. Michael. But the way she said it made my chest tight. We hugged, and it was awkward at first, but then it wasn't. She smelled different. Not bad different. Just different. Like vanilla and something else I couldn't place. When we pulled apart, she had tears in her eyes, and I felt mine starting too, which was embarrassing, but I didn't care. She asked if she could sit down, and obviously I said yes. We started with the basic stuff. What are you doing in Portland? How's your family? All that surface-level catching up that people do when they haven't seen each other in forever. She told me she moved here 2 years ago for work. She's doing something with graphic design for this tech company. I told her I was just visiting my brother for the weekend. But the whole time we were talking about normal stuff, there was this other conversation happening underneath. This tension. Because we both knew we were avoiding the real thing. The thing that happened 8 years ago that made us stop talking completely. Back in college, Emma and I were best friends. Like the kind of best friends that everyone thought were dating, but we always said we weren't. We did everything together. Late-night study sessions, road trips to nowhere, those long conversations at 3 in the morning about life and dreams and fears. Yeah, she knew everything about me, and I knew everything about her. At least I thought I did. Then, one night during our senior year, everything changed. We were at this party at her apartment. Nothing crazy, just some friends hanging out. I was sitting on her couch, and she sat down next to me, closer than usual. The party was loud, but she leaned in, and I could hear her perfectly when she asked if we could talk somewhere quiet. We went out to her balcony, and she seemed nervous. She kept playing with her hair, which she always did when something was bothering her. I asked her what was wrong, and she looked at me with these eyes that I'd never seen before. She opened her mouth to say something, and then stopped. Started again. Stopped again. Then her roommate came out and said someone was looking for her, and the moment was gone. And she went back inside, and I stood there on that balcony, feeling like something huge almost happened, but didn't. The rest of the night was weird. She avoided me. Every time I tried to catch her eye, she'd look away. After that night, things got strange between us. She started being distant. She'd cancel plans, take forever to text back. I didn't understand what I'd done wrong. I kept replaying that balcony moment in my head, trying to figure out what she was going to say. Then, graduation happened, and we both moved to different cities. We texted a few times, but it felt forced. Eventually, we just stopped. No big fight. No dramatic ending. We just drifted apart, and it killed me because I never knew why. Sitting across from her now in this coffee shop, 8 years later, all of those feelings came rushing back. But not just the confusion and hurt, but the other feelings too. the ones I'd never let myself fully admit back then. She took a sip of her coffee and asked how long I was in town. I told her just until Monday. She nodded and got quiet. Then she said something that made my heart race. She said we should get dinner, catch up properly, not in a loud coffee shop, but somewhere we could really talk. I said yes immediately, maybe too immediately. She smiled, and it was the first real smile I'd seen from her since we sat down. We exchanged numbers again. New numbers, because apparently we'd both changed them over the years. We made plans for that night. The rest of the day, I couldn't focus on anything. My brother kept asking me what was wrong. I told him I ran into an old friend, but I didn't tell him who. And I didn't tell him about the knot in my stomach, or the way I kept checking my phone to make sure she hadn't canceled. She texted me around 5 with the name of a restaurant, some Italian place on the east side. She said 7:30. I got there at 7:15 like an idiot and sat in my car, giving myself a pep talk. I didn't even know what I was nervous about. This was Emma, my best friend. Except she wasn't anymore, and maybe she never really was, just my friend. I walked in, and she was already there at a corner table. She'd changed clothes. She was wearing this dark blue dress, and her hair was down. She looked beautiful. She'd always been beautiful, but I'd spent 4 years of college trying not to notice that too much. We ordered wine and pasta, and for the first hour we kept doing that same thing, talking about safe topics, her job, my job, mutual friends from college, who got married, who moved away. It felt good, but also frustrating, because I could tell we were both dancing around something bigger. Then the waiter cleared our plates, and Emma ordered another glass of wine. She never used to drink much, so I knew something was coming. She took a long sip, and then she looked right at me. Really looked at me. And she said, "We need to talk about that night. The party. The balcony." My whole body tensed up. I'd waited 8 years to hear what she was going to say that night, and suddenly I wasn't sure I wanted to know anymore. What if it was something bad? What if she was going to tell me I'd done something wrong? What if this dinner was just her way of getting closure so she could move on completely? But I nodded. I said okay, and she started talking. She told me that night on the balcony she was going to tell me she was in love with me. Just like that. No build-up in the story, just straight to the point. She said the words, and then looked down at her wine glass, like she couldn't believe she'd actually said them out loud. I just sat there, completely frozen. My brain was trying to process what she just said, but it felt like everything was moving in slow motion. She was in love with me. 8 years ago, Emma was in love with me. She kept talking. She said she'd been in love with me since sophomore year, that every time we stayed up late talking, she wanted to kiss me, that every time someone asked if we were dating, she wanted to say yes. She said she'd planned that whole party just to have an excuse to finally tell me. She'd practiced what she was going to say for weeks. But then, when the moment came, she got scared. She said she looked at me on that balcony and realized that if she told me, and I didn't feel the same way, she'd lose me completely. She'd rather have me as a friend than risk losing me forever. So when her roommate interrupted, she took it as a sign. She decided not to say anything. I finally found my voice and asked her why she pulled away after that night, why she got so distant. She said it was too hard, being around me knowing how she felt and knowing she couldn't tell me. She said every time she saw me, it hurt. So she started avoiding me. She thought maybe if she created distance, the feelings would go away. Then, after graduation, she thought the distance would help. New city, new life, new people. She dated other guys. She tried to move on. But she said she never really did. And she said there was always this part of her that wondered what would have happened if she'd just been brave enough to tell me the truth that night. I didn't know what to say. I mean, what do you say when someone tells you something like that? I just kept staring at her, trying to make sense of everything. 8 years. She'd carried this for 8 years. She started apologizing, saying she shouldn't have brought it up, that it wasn't fair to dump this on me after all this time. She said she just wanted me to know, that seeing me today made her realize she didn't want to spend the rest of her life wondering what if. Then she asked the question I was dreading. She asked if I ever felt the same way, if I ever thought about us as more than friends. My mouth went dry. I picked up my water glass and took a sip just to buy myself a few seconds. Because the truth was yes. Of course I had. But I'd never let myself really go there. Emma was my best friend, and I'd convinced myself that what I felt was just really strong friendship. I told myself that everyone feels that way about their best friend. But sitting there looking at her, I couldn't lie. Not after she'd been so honest with me. So I told her yes. I told her that junior year when she was dating that guy from her psychology class. I was jealous. I told her that I used to make excuses to touch her hand or sit close to her. I told her that sometimes late at night, I'd imagine what it would be like to kiss her, but then I'd feel guilty because I thought she only saw me as a friend. Her eyes filled with tears again. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. She said we were both idiots, yet that we wasted so much time being scared. I squeezed her hand back and said we can't change the past. All we can do is figure out what happens now. She nodded and wiped her eyes with her free hand. Then she asked what I wanted to happen now. I told her the truth. I said I'd spent 8 years trying to forget about her, that I'd dated other people and tried to build a life that didn't include her. But seeing her today made me realize I never really moved on either, that maybe some part of me had been waiting for this moment. We paid the bill and walked outside. It was raining a little. That typical Portland drizzle that's not quite rain, but more than mist. We stood under the restaurant awning, and she moved closer to me. She said she had one more thing to confess. My heart was already racing, but somehow it started beating even faster. And I asked her what it was. She said that when she moved to Portland 2 years ago, it wasn't just for work. She said she knew my brother lived here. She'd seen it on social media. She said some small part of her hoped that maybe one day she'd run into me, that maybe the universe would give her another chance. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked if she was saying she moved here because of me. She said not entirely, but kind of. She said she had other reasons. But yes, I was part of it. She said she knew it sounded crazy, but she couldn't stop thinking about what might have been. She said she'd been going to that coffee shop every Saturday morning for 2 years, hoping. I pulled her into a hug right there on the street in the rain. I held her tight, and I could feel her heart beating against my chest. And I told her I couldn't believe this was real, that I kept thinking I was going to wake up and it would all be a dream. She pulled back just enough to look up at me. Her face was inches from mine. She said it wasn't a dream, that she was really here and I was really here, and we finally knew the truth. I knew I should kiss her. Everything in me wanted to kiss her, but something held me back. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the weight of 8 years. Maybe it was the fact that I lived in Chicago and she lived here, and I had no idea how any of this could actually work. She must have seen the hesitation in my eyes because she stepped back a little. She said we didn't have to figure everything out tonight, that this was already a lot. I agreed. We decided to walk for a bit, even though it was raining. We ended up at this park near the river, and there was a bench under a tree and we sat down. The branches kept most of the rain off us. We talked for hours, not about the heavy stuff, but about everything else. She told me about her life in Portland, her apartment, her friends here, her job. I told her about Chicago, about my work as an accountant, which sounds boring, but she made me feel like it was interesting. It felt like college again, like no time had passed, except everything had changed because now there were no secrets between us. Now we both knew the truth. Around midnight, she said she should probably get home. She had plans with friends in the morning. I walked her to her car. When we got there, we stood in the parking lot, and neither of us wanted to say goodbye. She asked when my flight back to Chicago was. I told her Monday afternoon. She nodded and bit her lip. And then she asked if I wanted to spend the day with her tomorrow. Sunday, just the two of us. I said yes without even thinking about it. She smiled and gave me her address. She said to come over around 10 and to wear comfortable shoes because she wanted to show me her favorite spots in the city. We hugged again, and this time when we pulled apart, our faces were close. So close I could feel her breath. For a second, I thought it was going to happen, our first kiss after all these years. But then she squeezed my hand and got in her car. I watched her drive away and stood there in the parking lot, feeling like my whole world had just tilted on its axis. Everything I thought I knew about the past 8 years was different now. All those what-ifs weren't what-ifs anymore. They were real possibilities. I drove back to my brother's place in a daze, but he was still up watching TV. He took one look at me and asked what happened. I told him everything. About Emma, about what she said, about how she felt, and how I felt. He just sat there, shaking his head. Then he said something that hit me hard. He asked what I was going to do about it. Because having feelings was one thing, but actually doing something about them was another. He reminded me that I had a whole life in Chicago. A job, an apartment, friends. He asked if I was really ready to blow all that up for someone I hadn't seen in 8 years. I didn't have an answer. I went to bed that night, but I couldn't sleep. I just kept thinking about Emma and that balcony and all the years we lost. I kept thinking about tomorrow and what it would be like to spend the whole day with her. And I kept thinking about Monday when I'd have to get on a plane and leave her again. I barely slept that night. I kept waking up every hour checking my phone to see what time it was. By 9 in the morning, I gave up on sleep completely and got in the shower. I must have changed my shirt 3 times before my brother told me I was being ridiculous and to just pick one. I got to Emma's place at exactly 10. She lived in this cute neighborhood with tree-lined streets and old houses that had been converted into apartments. Hers was on the 2nd floor of a blue Victorian. I stood outside her door for a minute, just breathing before I knocked. She answered wearing jeans and a yellow sweater, and her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked so casual and comfortable and beautiful. She smiled when she saw me and said she was glad I came, like there was any chance I wouldn't. Her apartment was small but cozy. Lots of plants and books and artwork on the walls. Some of it looked like stuff she'd designed. She offered me coffee, and we sat in her kitchen talking for a bit. It felt weirdly domestic, like we'd done this 1,000 times before. Then she said she wanted to take me to her favorite bookstore. But it was this independent place a few blocks away. We walked there, and she kept pointing out different spots in the neighborhood. The bakery where she gets croissants on weekends, the park where she goes running, the bar where she meets her friends for trivia night. She was showing me her life, and I realized how much I wanted to be part of it. At the bookstore, we wandered around for over an hour. She'd pull books off shelves and read me passages. I'd do the same. We ended up in the poetry section, and she found this book of love poems. She read one out loud, and when she finished, she looked at me, and I knew she'd picked it on purpose. It was about 2 people finding each other after years apart. We bought a few books, and then went to lunch at this sandwich shop she loved. We sat by the window and watched people walk by. Well, she told me more about her friends here, about how she'd built a good life, but something always felt missing. She didn't say it was me, but I could tell that's what she meant. I asked her if she was seeing anyone. The question had been eating at me since last night, but I'd been too scared to ask. She said no. She'd dated people over the years, but nothing serious, nothing that stuck. She said she kept comparing everyone to a memory, and they never measured up. I told her I was the same, that I'd had a couple relationships, but they never felt right. I never told anyone this, but I'd break up with girls because they weren't her. They didn't laugh at my jokes the way she did. They didn't understand me the way she did. She reached across the table and took my hand. She said we really did waste a lot of time, and I agreed. But I also said maybe we needed that time. Maybe we had to grow up and figure ourselves out before we could do this right. After lunch, she took me to the Japanese garden. It was beautiful. All these carefully designed paths and bridges and ponds. We walked slowly, taking our time. At one point, we stopped on a bridge overlooking the water, and she leaned against the railing. She said she needed to ask me something serious, and I knew exactly what was coming. She asked what happens after tomorrow, when I go back to Chicago and she stays here. I'd been dreading this question because I didn't have a good answer. I told her I didn't know, that I wanted to figure it out, but I needed to think. She nodded like she understood, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She said she didn't want to do long distance, or that she'd tried it before and it didn't work. She said if we were going to do this, we needed to really do it, not halfway, not texts and phone calls and seeing each other every few months. She said she'd already spent 8 years loving me from a distance, and she couldn't do it anymore. We kept walking and ended up back at her apartment. The sun was setting, and we sat on her couch not saying much. Finally, she turned to me and said she had to tell me something. She said that if I asked her to, she'd move to Chicago, that she could find work there, that her whole reason for being in Portland was the hope of running into me, and now that had happened. I was stunned. I told her she couldn't do that. She couldn't uproot her whole life for me. She said none of that mattered as much as this, as us. And she said she'd already lost me once because she was too scared to take a risk. She wasn't going to make that mistake again. Then she kissed me, just leaned in and kissed me, and everything else fell away. It was soft at first, then it deepened, and it felt like coming home. Like everything I'd been missing for 8 years was right here. When we pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. She said she'd been wanting to do that since sophomore year. We stayed like that for hours, talking and kissing and making up for lost time. She fell asleep on my shoulder, and I just watched her thinking about everything. My flight was in the morning. I had to make a decision. I carefully moved and grabbed my phone. I opened my email and started typing. I wrote to my boss saying I needed to take the week off. Family emergency. Then I looked at Emma sleeping peacefully, and I knew what I had to do. When she woke up, I was still there. She looked surprised, like maybe she thought I'd left. I told her I canceled my flight, that I was staying for the week, that we were going to figure this out together because she was right. We'd wasted enough time being scared. She started crying and laughing at the same time. She threw her arms around me and said she loved me. Just said it right there. I said it back because it was true. I'd loved her for 8 years. I just never had the courage to admit it. I don't know what happens next. Maybe I'll move here. Maybe she'll move to Chicago. Maybe we'll find somewhere new for both of us. But for the first time in 8 years, I'm not running from this. I'm running toward it. I'm running